Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Lackawanna Pastimes. I'm Sarah Puccini, the Assistant Director of the Lackawanna Historical Society. In April, we celebrate Earth Day, which is a topic we've usually kind of overlooked in our history, in our industrial histories of Scranton. So we thought we'd take a look at some environmental history for this episode of Lackawanna Pastimes. And we're excited to be joined by Bernie McGurl, who's Old Man River himself. Bernie is the longtime chair of the Lackawanna River Conservation Association, who has been doing great work to clean and maintain the Lackawanna River. So Bernie, I'll turn the program over to you to talk about the history of the Lackawanna River and the Old Forge borehole.
Well, thank you for the invitation to join everyone this afternoon. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Yeah, the river. We have a valley, and there's a river that runs through it, and it's entwined with our communities and entwined with our history, and we are entwined with it and on it and in it, and we mess it up pretty bad, but it's still doing what it always does. Flows from the mountains to the sea. It's our connection to the great Susquehanna River watershed and the greater Chesapeake Bay watershed. And we're up at the top of the Chesapeake Bay watershed in Pennsylvania, up in the northeast here. We're on the far northeast edge of the Susquehanna watershed, Chesapeake watershed. So if you're up at the summit of Music Mountain, say up by the Ailes Preserve and Music Lake, and if you're walking along the ridgeline there, and you can see Music Lake down to the east, and you can see the valley down to the west, you're right on the watershed boundary of the great Chesapeake watershed and the Delaware watershed. Okay. So everything on the east side of the Music Range flows down into the Wallenpaupack or the Lehigh and Delaware. And there's a large exception of the North Pocono Plateau, where the headwaters of Roaring Brook and Spring Brook and Stafford Meadowbrook are in the North Pocono area around Covington, Madison townships, and out into Springbrook Township. And that's sort of the far eastern, southeastern portion of the Lackawanna watershed. And those two big streams in Stafford Meadowbrook, which are all very, very important to the water supply of the Lackawanna and Wyoming Valley. And I'm just going to, rather than try to do a share the screen, I'm barely literate in the 21st century computer systems. I'm sort of an analog guy in a digital world, so I'm going to just have some screen share things here that I'll bring up.
That's fair, Bernie. We're a historical society, so no worries. We do the same thing.
Here we go. This is my version of screen share. And this is a map of the Lackawanna River watershed boundaries, and it's our our Conservation Corps map. And the Lackawanna watershed is it's 350 square miles in northeastern Pennsylvania, in parts of 4 counties, mostly in Lackawanna County, but the headwaters up here in Wayne and Susquehanna County, above Stillwater Dam, in Uniondale and Ararat Townships, and Preston Township and Herrick Township up there, just east of Elk Mountain and Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat is within the Lackawanna watershed. Elk Mountain is not. Elk Mountain is just to our west, and that is in the Tunkhannock Creek watershed. And Ararat is also the northern extension of the Music Mountain Range, and it is the northern end of the range. And east of Ararat is the headwaters of the Lackawaxen River. And so we're right up at the top of the watershed in eastern Pennsylvania is up there. Elk Mountain is the highest point between the Delaware and Susquehanna rivers in Pennsylvania. Mount Ararat is the second highest point. And collectively, they are the seventh and eighth highest elevations within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So that's the top of the watershed for eastern Pennsylvania up there. And then down here is the North Pocono parts of the watershed that are east of the Moosic Mountain Range. So Springbrook and Stafford Meadowbrook and Roaring Brook come in through water gaps in the Moosic Mountain Range. The Roaring Brook comes in through the Cobb's Gap between Dunmore and Elmhurst. It's that big canyon there where Interstate 84 and 380 go out. Springbrook comes through Springbrook Gap over along Route 502 between the Nesbitt Reservoir and Moosic Borough. And Stafford Meadowbrook comes through Simerson's Gap between Scrub Oak Mountain and Coon Hill along Route 307 just east of Lake Scranton. And Lake Scranton, by the way, this could be one of the trivia questions. So I'm not supposed to share them, am I, Marianne? We'll save that. I'll have a question, but there will be a question about Lake Scranton in the trivia, but we'll keep that under wraps. So this is so the Lackawanna watershed. It sort of has it reminds me of the symbol for the British currency, the pound sterling. It's sort of shaped like an L. So if we were doing calligraphy, we might be able to use the watershed boundary in a fanciful way to say Lackawanna. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So basically, it's such a big watershed. We're looking for volunteers, and we like to sort of classify the different parts of the watershed. So we have 7 districts for our Conservation Corps volunteers. And we sort of used the topography of the mountain ranges, the East and West Mountains, and the school district boundaries, more or less, to aggregate or the different watershed areas. So we start out in the North Pocono, and that's District 1, and then down in the lower Lackawanna, around Duryea and Pittston and Avoca and Old Forge, et cetera. That's District 2, and then Scranton Dunmore in the Metro District, District 3. The Mid-Valley, Valley View is District 4, and District 5 is the Abingtons. Again, the several other water gaps in the West Mountain Range where water streams come through on the upper Allegheny Plateau around the Abingtons. We have the headwaters of Leggett's Creek, and they flow through Leggett's Gap in the West Mountains between Chinchilla and Providence, also known as the Notch. And it is one of the most profound, deep, twisty, gnarly gaps. And we're still trying to figure out how to get bicycles and pedestrians safely through there. We have a little bit north of there in German, we have Rushbrook Gap, where Rushbrook Creek comes down from Hart Lake and down through the village of German into the river. And a smaller gap that is not that visible, but it's up on Myers Mountain, Calendar Gap, which also flows down through Archibald and German. And then on the other side of the valley up there is Ellsworth, somewhat of a gap in on the side of Moosic Mountain, but Ellsworth doesn't come through the mountain. It rises and springs on the flank, on the western flank of the Moosic Mountain. So it doesn't, it's not a true gap that cuts through the mountain range itself, but there is a canyon up there, as well as over towards the headwaters of some of the other smaller streams up there. So that's somewhat of the physical geography of the watershed. And I'll put that down, and then let's see what else can I say. I've got a few more things to talk about, but I think when we've studied the watershed and studied what we have done to it, it's really helpful to look at older maps. And this is a copy of the second Geological Survey of Pennsylvania, the topographic map of the Scranton Quadrangle in 1893. And this is very useful because this shows the location and the presence of what I call the lost streams of the Lackawanna. There are many streams that we don't have with us anymore, or their manifestation is that of stormwater drainage swales and sanitary sewer sheds. And sadly, that's what happened to one of the largest one of those streams that was lost to urban development would be Pine Brook. And Marianne had someone inquiring about Pine Brook a few weeks ago, and I yet to get a chance to contact the gentleman, but I will be. Anyway, Pine Brook, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Pine Brook. It rose in wetlands and springs on the hillsides above Dunmore Corners, along Chestnut Street and Smith Street and Ward Street, along East Drinker Street, and down through Dunmore Corners and down along South Blakely Street. It ran as a defined stream, and like through where today we'd have the CVS by the Dunmore Borough Building, and down through the Dunmore Lumberyard area, and down through the Dundell neighborhood in the lower 6th Ward of Dunmore, down across underneath Monroe Avenue, near Grove by Padula's, just a little bit over from Padula's, where the county forensic laboratories are located, and then down through the PP&L properties, the old O.S. Johnson breaker over there, and down into Washington Avenue and Phelps Street. If anyone has neighbors or friends who live on Phelps Street, they often have their cars up to their hubcaps or motor wells when we have heavy summer thunderstorms. And that's because Phelps Street used to be the creek bed of Pine Brook. And then on over under Gibson Street and down to Olive and Capouse underneath the Vine Street Railroad Bridge that crosses at an angle there by the old Dixon Works. And that part of Olive Street is always flooding and problematic because, again, that's the creek bed. And the only part of Pine Brook that sees sunlight today is about a 60-foot reach between an opening of a large stone culvert bridge that carries the the former D&H railway from Scranton up to Carbondale, right by the switch for the Strawberry Hill branch going up towards Mifflin Avenue. From that point into the river, there's a little estuary, and that's what's left of the mouth of Pine Brook Creek. Up near Dunmore Lumber, it was in a very deep, rocky ravine lined with wonderful old growth 400-year-old pine trees and hemlock trees and white oaks and other native forest species along there, with rhododendron and mountain laurel and waterfalls. But that no longer exists. It was gradually filled in and used for other purposes between the 1850s and the 1890s. By the 1880s, the development of Dunmore Corners advanced to such a point, and there were the water companies were organized, and there was water supply brought to people's homes and businesses. And the introduction of the flush toilet replaced the privy pit and the latrine out back. And Dunmore Corners needed some place for that all to go. So it was going into what had been Pine Brook at the time, and it was very unsanitary. So it was decided that the remnants of Pine Brook would be converted into a sewer culvert. And there is a large masonry culvert about 20 to 30 feet under Dunmore Corners, under Blakely Street and down, and it's about 40 feet deep below Dunmore Lumberyard. And there's actually a place, there's a manhole in the parking lot of the Dunmore Lumberyard. If you open that up, there's a manhole passage that goes vertically down, and iron ladder built into the masonry, and it goes down 40 feet into that culvert. And it's a sort of an egg-shaped culvert, very similar to one that runs under Bogart Court in downtown Scranton. There are several of them in the community. That's the earliest of our sanitary infrastructure that was built in the 1880s to address health concerns and to transmit all of that sanitary material to the river or to a nearby stream. So that's the sad history of Pine Brook. There are half a dozen other smaller streams in Hyde Park and West Scranton that similar things happen to, and remnants of Meadowbrook between Dunmore and the river down through the Forest Hill Cemetery. There's still evidence of the channel of Meadowbrook Creek. It's an open creek, but the headwaters of Meadowbrook were destroyed by the Pennsylvania Coal Company in the 1890s, late 1880s and 1890s. And that is an interesting, I'm just going to put this down for a minute. An interesting facet of legal history and environmental law and interpretation of various civil rights and water rights. So the Pennsylvania Coal Company had for many years a mining operation located where the scale house at the Keystone landfill is located today. And it was called the Gypsy Grove. And there was actually an inclined plane from the gravity railroad up by Dunmore number 1 reservoir that came down grade to ship the coal out of the Gypsy Grove breaker that was located approximately where Route 81 and the Swinnock development are located today. So that had been going along. That mining operation was in progress in the 1860s, 70s, and into the 80s. And as it progressed, it was sitting on top of what was the headwaters of Meadowbrook. And it was a large cranberry bog, Pocono Mountains bog area that existed in the environs of Keystone Landfill and Keystone Industrial Park and that part of Dunmore. So there were extensive boglands and wetlands and springs fed by the snowpack and rainfall on Music Mountain, and going through crevices in the rock ledges and interacting with deposits of glacial gravels and sands that were interbedded with bog materials from the regrowth of vegetation after the last glacier. So that was a huge geologic and biological sponge that was the headwaters for Meadowbrook. So as the 1870s and 80s progressed, that was gradually impinged upon to a greater and greater degree by the Pennsylvania Coal Company, a lovely organization, I might add, headed by that irascible Irad Hawley back in its early days, and later dominated by interests associated with the Erie Railroad and the Schweringen brothers, who were the main owners and dominators of the Erie Railroad in the late 19th and early 20th century. And they were rapacious and cynical bastards that outpaced any of Irad Hawley's greater machinations by far. Anyhow, I digress. So about the same time that all that was going on, we had our friends Edward Sturgis and George Sanderson developing the suburb of Greenridge and the electric trolley system. And that actually resulted in Greenridge being the first electric trolley commutation oriented suburban community on the planet Earth. How about that? So that's something we can claim. And it's a very interesting thing. It was transit oriented development is a big jargon with the transportationistas who try to influence our Congress to do smart transportation, things like ICE-T, where we have intermodal surface transportation back in the 90s that finally funded the rails to trails movement, and we built a lot of our trails along the river with that kind of federal funding, and that still continues. There's lots of set-asides for non-highway transportation, and it goes to the idea that, very interesting idea that critters with two legs and big mouths and heads with hair on them, we're the ones that actually pay the taxes, not the machines that we climb into with four big rubber reels that run everywhere and burn carbon and destroy the earth. We're the ones that pay taxes. So maybe it's an okay thing, even though Dave Cavergis or whatever his name is that writes letters to the Times doesn't think we should spend transportation money on things that benefit human beings. I think it's a good thing. And so that's been going on for a number of years. Anyhow, so Sanderson and Sturgis developed Green Ridge, developed the trolley, and out at the intersection of Washington Avenue and Electric Street, there's a little city park. That is actually Sturgis Park, across from the Church of the Good Shepherd and catty corner from the oral school. And there's a large circular stone planter in the middle of Sturgis Park. And it was originally built as a fountain. And Mrs. Sturgis and Mrs. Sanderson and all the other good ladies of Green Ridge, whose hardworking husbands were building the industrial and commercial activities of Scranton in the late 19th century, they were very pleased and proud and cared lovingly for their park and their fountain and their neighborhood. There were some series of small waterworks upstream of the park along Meadowbrook and on the grounds of the oral school, and then several other small ponds up above in the Forest Hill Cemetery. And they were lovingly fed by the spring waters coming out of the wetlands up by the Gypsy Grove Colliery and flowing down towards the river. And there was a small waterworks installed on that lower pond in the oral school property, and fed a pipe that came and supplied water for that fountain. So for a number of years in the 1880s, there was a fountain there, and lovely clean water was gushing forth from the fountain, and the lovely homes of the neighborhood of Green Ridge were being built and developed and occupied by multitudes of families, and the people were commuting to the downtown and to jobs and other activities by our wonderful electric trolley system. About 1889, as there was more demand for anthracite coal and mining activities continued to expand, the Gypsy Grove Colliery also expanded, and they added a washery. They got tired of employing 7 to 10-year-old boys and decided to mechanize everything with mechanical means to separate the coal and the rock. And they dammed up the headwaters of Meadowbrook and sucked all the water out of it to use in the breaker and the washery operations there. And all of a sudden, the water in the fountain started to just gush. Instead of nice, clean mountain spring water, it was now gushing black anthracite breaker silt coal water. And it was an abomination. And the creek, the happy little macroinvertebrates living in the creek were suffocated by flush after flush from the washery of this coal wash water, devastated the habitat of the little critters on the bottom of the creek, and ghastly polluted the fountain. So the Sandersons and the Sturgis and other members of the neighborhood sued the Pennsylvania Coal Company in Lackawanna County Court, and the court found in their favor and said, Pennsylvania Coal Company, you have to stop doing that. And Pennsylvania Coal Company said, no, we don't. and we won't. And they went into Superior Court or Commonwealth Court, I can't recall which, but they presented their side of the story to the good justices in either Philadelphia or Harrisburg, wherever that court was sitting at the time. And of course, Pennsylvania's jurisprudence has always been and continues to be in favor of the big guy and the corporation at the expense of the public interest. That's my perception as a former liberal Democrat. But that was really one of the first cases where a community had risen up and said enough to the coal companies. And unfortunately, they lost. And there were several other cases against the Pennsylvania Coal Company by the community for various things in Mattis versus Pennsylvania Coal Company in regard to some of the underground mining rights in Scranton later in the teens and 20s that tried to prevent the coal companies from dynamiting pillars and robbing pillars and causing whole neighborhoods and hospitals and schools and churches to cave in to these horrible pits that they were creating by their robbing of the pillars under our community. So all that, there was all kinds of conflict going on with the community and the coal companies back around that time, and the beginning of the progressive era in the early part of the 20th century. People gradually fought back against that over the years, and by the 1930s, people in Pennsylvania began to say, hey, we really need to do something about the waters of Pennsylvania. We're operating sanitary systems that are just dumping all kinds of waste into the waters of the Commonwealth, and coal companies and industries of all types, slaughterhouses, et cetera, dye works, steel works, dumping stuff into our waters. So by 1937, Pennsylvania legislature, with the people like Gifford Pinchot involved in government at the time, and other good folks during the New Deal era, passed the Clean Streams Law. Pennsylvania's Clean Streams Law of 1937 is landmark legislation nationwide for preserving water quality and environmental quality. And it came into effect, and immediately had a couple of outcomes that I'll address. One, locally, the Commonwealth Department of Health and Forests and Waters started to send letters out to people like the mayors of Scranton and Wilkes-Barre and Kingston and Dunmore and Blakely and Carbondale, saying, gentlemen, we have a new law in Pennsylvania, and you need to be advised that your community is discharging sanitary wastes from your sanitary collection systems into the waters of the Commonwealth. And you have to stop that. You have to look to ways to develop sanitary water treatment plants to clean that. And so the city of Scranton complied with that to a degree. They developed the contract with Gannett Fleming, an engineering firm still operating in Harrisburg, and they designed our Scranton sewer plant. And that design was completed in 1940. And along with the construction estimates of several dozen $1 million to build it and connect a causeway or a pipe system, intercept all the sanitary lines along the rivers and streams in Scranton and Dunmore, and direct that to a treatment facility. The price of that gave the mayor and council at the time sticker shock, and up and down the valley, the mayors and councilmen were telling their state representatives, yeah, we'll build a sewer plant as soon as you get that ABC coal company to stop dumping all their waste from the breaker and the mine drainage from the mines into the river. So we build a sewer plant and the coal companies are still polluting the river. What are we doing? So there was a lot of resistance to that law. And some communities gradually began to implement it, but it was a 20 to 30 year process. Now, on the federal level, very interestingly, that law, Pennsylvania Clean Streams Law, was taken to Harrisburg in the satchels of several new dealers. And it became the template for the first Clean Water Act of the United States that defined the waters of the United States as something that should not be polluted, and everyone had a right to clean water. And it passed Congress in 1938. However, it was defeated by that arch conservative pro-business president that we had at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Can you believe that? Roosevelt vetoed the first version of the National Federal Clean Water Act. Why, you might ask? Interesting. White House counsel said, Franklin, it's not gonna be very popular down in Alabama or Mississippi or Tennessee or Kentucky or maybe even Kansas or California or Texas or even up in Pennsylvania. There's going to be a lot of resistance to it. And boy, you got your knickers in a twist when you tried to pack the Supreme Court last year. So we're strongly advising you, Mr. President, to veto it. And so he did. And that was that. And then the Second World War started. Scranton had their plan and they put it on the shelf and said, we got other things to do because we got to defeat these Nazis, and real Nazis at the time. We had real Nazis. They were real Nazis, and we defeated them. And then in 1948, Congress went back and dusted off the legislation, and they passed it again. And Harry Truman signed it. But what did he sign? He signed basically the theory of the Clean Water Act in 1948. It was a template that said, here's what Pennsylvania is doing, all you other 49, or well, actually at the time, all you other 47 states. Here's what Pennsylvania is doing. You should do this, but we're not making you. There's no stick here. There's just a bunch of carrots, and they're raw carrots, and they're not very appetizing if you're not a mule or a horse or a vegetarian who likes raw carrots. So there really wasn't any money involved either. It was just conceptual. Here's a good thing to do. So that was the first version of Clean Water Act, and some people began to implement it, and but it didn't really gather a head of steam. But in Pennsylvania, we had our legislation, the Clean Streams Law, that did have enforcement. So finally, the Department of Health and the Commonwealth got serious with the municipalities in the Lackawanna Valley after November 1st, 1961, or about that time. Because what happened was the demise of the anthracite industry. There were no longer big, bad coal companies furiously dumping crap into our waterways. They went away. So did the excuse of our local governments, when you get the ABC Coal Company to do that, we'll do it. Well, the ABC Coal Company ain't there anymore, Mayor. So you got to do what you got to do and stop dumping that crap in the river. So Scranton started building under Mayor Walsh. We funded and created a Scranton Sewer Authority, and we built a marvelous sewer plant that was originally designed in 1940. It was constructed and went into operation in 1966. And then over the next several years, the pipelines were built to transfer all the sanitary waste. So the plant was ready to operate, but we had to build interceptor lines along the creeks and river to bring it all down, to make it fully functional by 1970, 71. And at the same time, Lackawanna County government stepped up to the plate on behalf of the smaller municipalities north and south of Scranton and the city of Carbondale, and they developed the Lackawanna River Basin Sewer Authority, and their system went into operation in 1972. And down in the lower Lackawanna, the several various municipalities in lower Lackawanna and upper Luzerne around Pittston Township and Avoca, Duryea, DuPont joined with Old Forge and Taylor in Lackawanna County, and they created the Lower Lackawanna Sanitary Authority. So by 1972, 73, all of our sanitary waste was going into treatment plants, and the river was getting much cleaner. But let's just go back to November 1st, 1961. And on that date, the Moffett Coal Company wrote a letter to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to the Department of Forests and Waters and the Department of Mines and Mineral Industries, at the time two separate departments that are now part of DCNR and DEP. And they said, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, please be advised that Moffett Coal Company is turning off our pumps. And by the way, we've been, since 1957, we've been operating the pumps of several other coal companies that have heretofore gone out of business, such as Glen Alden Corporation, the Hudson Coal Company, Reading Anthracite Company, and the Pennsylvania Coal Company being the larger ones, and half a dozen smaller ones. So as each of these anthracite behemoths started going belly up and disappearing from the legal landscape, they left their corpus along the valley, as we're all familiar growing up here, with burning coal dumps, caving in neighborhoods, and desiccated streams and waterways, and devastated sociological and economic impacts on our communities. So they started going out of business in 1957. There was actual economic intersection, if you will, of the cost of pumping water out of the mines in the Lackawanna syncline and the price available per ton of coal on the open market. Once you had that intersection, you were losing money if you were mining coal under Nanticoke, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Pittston, Carbondale, because the coal's in the bottom of the bathtub here. Now you can still make money up in Hazleton because you're on the top of the anticline, you're on top of the hill, and your mine drainage goes by gravity out into the Schuylkill or Lehigh tributaries, and the Nescopec and the Little Schuylkill and whatnot. So there was still mining going on down there, but the big guys up here that were, some of them traded blue chip on the New York Stock Exchange for many years, we're out of here. We no longer exist. Goodbye. Moffett, which was local, they were the last guy standing. So they had a Tontine agreement with one another. Okay, you got a business, you guys run the pumps and keep my mine from flooding your mine, and we don't know. We'll see you. Goodbye. So that went on in November of 61. Moffett said, we're done. We're out of here. So over the winter of 61 and 62, 60 years ago now, the mines filled up with water. So I'll get another screensaver here, screen share. Okay, how about this guy here? Now this is available on our, I think it's available on our website, or I could email it. I'll email this over to Marianne and she could send it out to everybody this afternoon. But this is a cross section that my good friend Kevin O'Neill, who's a artist for the Scranton Times, Kevin prepared this after some consultation with me, and this is a cross section, horizontal and longitudinal cross section of the mine measures under the Lackawanna Basin of the Lackawanna syncline that runs from Forest City down to Nanticoke. It's the northern anthracite field, and it's the Lackawanna Basin portion of the northern anthracite field. So that whole system filled with water between November of 61 and February, March of 62. So as it did, it started rising up and coming out all of the shafts and boreholes and air shafts and gangways and slopes and entryways that it could find its way out into the wider world. And it started flooding people's houses, coming down flooding streets, and the freezing and thawing cycles in January, February, and March of 62 were causing glaciers to appear at intersections in residential neighborhoods and in people's backyards and basements. And in the lower portion of the watershed, in the flats in Duryea and Music and whatnot, the entire groundwater of people's yards was surcharged with mine water, and their basements were filled with mine water. The sewers that were still running into the river were now saturated with mine water. Roads were caving in, and it was pretty much a public health and infrastructure disaster of noticeable proportions. And it got everybody's attention. And the Commonwealth and federal mining agencies got together with some consulting engineers, and they looked at the situation and they said, well, we've got a whole bunch of geologic structures going on in the base of the Lackawanna Valley, and we have a pinch out of the coal in Old Forge and up again in German. And those are the locations of the two larger mine drainage points in the valley. But at Old Forge, which is the largest, that pinch out is actually a result of a anticlinal crest in the wave motion of the rock of the valley that's perpendicular to the axis of the slope of the valley. So we're like a big banana split dish from the West Mountain to the Music Mountain, and the coal lies in the bottom of the banana split dish like chocolate sauce. But underneath that, it's not a flat bottom to the dish. There's a couple of humps, and the Music anticline crests at German and then dips down under Elephant and crests again at Old Forge. So those are two logical points if you're a geologist and a mining engineer, to say that's the bottom of the bathtub for the Lackawanna Basin. Let's drill a borehole in the riverbed there, and we'll pull the plug and drain all that water into the river, and it will stop flooding people's basements and causing all this havoc. So between May and September of 1962, the General Services Administration contracted on behalf of the Pennsylvania Department of Forests and Waters, with the assistance of the Department of Mines and Mineral Industries, to drill a 42-inch borehole in solid rock of the rock ledge of the crest of the Music anticline of all these rock ledges that are visible in the Lackawanna riverbed down by Union Street in the Connell's Patch neighborhood of Old Forge, just 800 feet north of the Luzerne-Lackawanna County border. And they drilled down with a huge drill with rotary bits on it. They drilled down 107 feet into the roof of the red ash vein that was mined out by the Pennsylvania Coal Company's operations down there. And they used that rotary bit and drilled down. And then about 104 feet, they pulled the drill string and pulled that bit out, and they reinserted a mandrel bit, which is a core bit. So it was a big 42-inch steel bit with all kinds of tungsten and diamond teeth around the outside and on the inside. And they drilled the final 3 feet with that mandrel bit. And they did that to create that plug of cylindrical rock that weighs about 4 or 5 tons. And that acted like a cork, because if they had drilled with their rotary drill and punctured the roof of the mine, there would have been so much water pressure that it would have been like one of those oil geysers from those old films that you see in Oklahoma and Tulsa, where they're having a wildcat and a gusher, and it would have had thousands and thousands and thousands of millions of gallons of water and tons of force pushing that rotary drill rig and the drill string up through the drilling apparatus and up into the air, along with lots of water, and threatening the safety and operation of the operators and the drillers and any nearby residents. It would have been a catastrophe if they had lost control of that. So they they drilled that plug out, and then gradually, one drill string length at a time, extracted it, and then let the water gush out. But they, while they were doing that, they also designed a channel in the rock ledge for about 800 feet, and they have it covered with a cap of concrete. It looks like it might be a driveway or something down along the riverbank. And then there's an opening in it just underneath the bridge abutment of the Union Street Bridge, where it actually discharges into the waterway of the river. And there's a concrete gate structure with a big gate valve that is got a wheel on it to open and close it. But the apparatus of that all rusted out within about 6 weeks of it being built in 1962. So that whole thing was put into operation in September of 1962. They pulled that stone plug out, and it's been flowing out into the waters of the Lackawanna River at a rate of about, today, probably a sunny day, about 60 million gallons a day into the Lackawanna River there. And it has approximately 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of iron oxide dissolved in it. So I don't know if I have, I don't know where they are. I did have a couple of beakers of mine water, but we just moved our offices around, so I don't know where anything is. And it's a messy, junky, scattered place. Anyway, here, I've got so many resources and they're all piled in bankers boxes. Total chaos, but that's the way it is. Anyhow, so this 5,000 pounds of iron completely dissolved. So if you took a beaker of it, it would be crystal clear, just like water from Lake Scranton. You could drink it, maybe you get giardia, but it's not going to kill you. So but when it comes into the water, it's exposed to the atmosphere. There's very little oxygen in the mine atmosphere, down in the mine and in the mine water. Very anoxic environment. When that iron oxide comes into the river water, it starts to mix with dissolved oxygen. As the river flows over rocks, it captures atmospheric gases and they become dissolved oxygen and dissolved nitrogen and other things in the water. So immediately the iron particles, molecules on a molecular level start binding with the oxygen in the river water on a molecular level. And enough of them come together that they're no longer just a molecule, they're hundreds and thousands of molecules, and they become a visible piece of precipitated flocculant. And they turn into this wifty little orange, slushy, smushy snowflake that floats to the bottom of the water column in the river and coats the cobblestones and rocks and vegetation on the sides of the channel with this orange oxide slime. So that's what you see. The water is pretty clear, but this precipitation occurs in the water column, and the particulates drop out and create a sludge and that orange color. And if you can see it from the air, you'll see it looks like an orange river, but the water's clear. It's the precipitate on the bottom that's visible. There's numerous photographs and whatnot of the confluence of the Lackawanna Susquehanna rivers. I'm not sure if we can see any of it. Here's a aerial view of the confluence, D&L Railroad Bridge going over to West Pittston near Scoville Island. And as the Lackawanna comes into Susquehanna, there's this huge stain of oxide that's visible just upstream of the Fort Jenkins Bridge and Route 11 Bridge in Pittston. And actually on down into the Wyoming Valley, that staining occurs, and then it's refreshed by the Butler Mine Tunnel, by the seepage around the residue of the Knox Mine disaster site in Port Griffiths, and the Plains borehole down in by the Omalia tomato farms down there in Plains. So there's more mine drainage coming into the big river down there and all the way down through the Wyoming Valley. But the mouth of the Lackawanna, there's another discharge in Duryea where the ground broke open and mine water came out from the Central and Number 9 mine pools that go up underneath the Avoca Airport and that are partially drained by the Butler Tunnel Works. And but it broke the ground open in Duryea, and it comes into the river, visible by the Coxton Road Bridge going over to the Coxton Flats area where the Lower Lackawanna treatment plant is. So all that drainage, it's been called the largest, most visible point source of pollution in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and it's on our river. So we've been trying to clean it up. We did a study. I'd refer you all to, if you're so inclined, that's on our website, the Lower Lackawanna River Watershed Assessment and Restoration Plan that we produced with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition of Abandoned Mine Reclamation in 2012. And we developed a thesis in that plan recommendation that it's such a large environmental problem. To our experience with trying to use federal mine reclamation money, there's so many strings and obligations attached to the mine reclamation bureaucracy. Yes, they do good work, but it's government and it's yeah. Oh, well, you can do this here and come on, get the thing done, get it cleaned up. Very frustrating over my career to have to deal with all that stuff. Anyway, so we suggest that what's needed is an eco-industrial park. And we suggest that it's a public-private venture where private capital can come in and perhaps occur some sort of attraction and benefit from harvesting the iron. Less attractive when you get into it more, and not enough money to maybe pay.
Very good, Bernie. It sounds like you're really onto something there. It would be great to see something happen with the borehole.
Yeah.
It would be great to see the Lackawanna Valley come forward again as a leader in industry again. And fuel after after anthracite coal was the story for so long. That would be a neat thing to see happen, kind of using old resources for new purposes. Bernie, again, thank you very much for joining us. There's a great presentation, a lot of good information there, a lot to think about, and a lot to digest. I will put the link to LRCA's website in the text for this video. If you're looking for more information, LRCA has a lot of resources on their website about the river and watershed and other projects that are still ongoing. Our next topic for Lackawanna Pastimes will be on Friday, May 20th at 2 o'clock. We'll be joined by Dale Kecklock, who's a local historian who will be focusing on local cemeteries just in time for Memorial Day. So we hope to see you again for that program. Thank you very much and have a great day.